Osamu Dazai is a man who wakes up every morning and chooses chaos. One minute, he's flirting with women and attempting double suicides for fun. The next, he's outsmarting international crime syndicates like it's a casual weekend hobby. And somehow, despite his constant desire to die, he keeps surviving. Dazai is a walking contradiction. He calls life meaningless, yet he's one of the most calculated survivors in Bungou stray dogs. He jokes about death, yet he's terrifyingly intelligent when it comes to saving others. He was once a cold-blooded mafia executive, yet now he spends his days solving mysteries, drinking tea, and annoying his coworkers. So what's the deal with him? Is he a genius or a fool? A hero or a villain? A depressed nihilist or a man just having way too much fun confusing everyone around him? The truth is, Dazai is all of these things, and none of them. Because beneath the jokes, the dramatic monologues, and the ridiculously elaborate suicide attempts, there's something much deeper. A man who isn't just looking for death. He's looking for a reason to live. This is Osamu Dazai, the man who laughs at death. And this is his story. Osamu Dazai is the kind of man who will try to drown himself in a river, get saved, and then immediately complain that the water wasn't deep enough. He turns every serious situation into a joke. And yet, somehow, he remains one of the most intelligent, dangerous, and unpredictable characters in Bungou stray dogs. At first glance, he seems like nothing more than comic relief. A lazy, eccentric detective who spends most of his time trying to find the most beautiful way to die. But the moment you scratch beneath that goofy suicidal surface, you find something far more complicated. Because for all his jokes, for all his playful flirting with the afterlife, Dazai isn't just seeking death, he's searching for meaning. Let's get one thing straight. Dazai isn't just pretending to be suicidal for the laughs. His obsession with death is real. But here's the contradiction. If he truly wanted to die, he'd be dead already. This is the same guy who can outmaneuver the port mafia, the government, and literal superpowered assassins. If he wanted to disappear from existence, he could. And yet, he doesn't. Instead, he turns his own death wish into a joke. Why? Because deep down, Dazai doesn't want to die. He just doesn't know how to live. His attempts at suicide aren't about ending his life. They're about testing his own existence. Seeing if maybe, just maybe, someone or something will give him a reason to stay. And in the meantime, well, if life is meaningless anyway, he might as well have fun messing with everyone around him. Honestly, Dazai is the only person who could make an existential crisis look like a fun weekend activity. Dazai's personality is equal parts ridiculous and genius. And that's the trick. Dazai wants you to underestimate him. He acts like an idiot so that people don't realize he's always 5 steps ahead. He plays the fool because it's easier than dealing with his own demons. He makes a joke out of life because if he stops laughing, he might start feeling. But make no mistake, underneath that goofy, flirtatious, and dramatic exterior is one of the sharpest minds in the world. And the moment you forget that, he's already won. The most important thing to understand about Dazai is this. He doesn't just want to die. He wants to die beautifully. This is crucial, because for him, death isn't about escape. It's about finding the perfect ending to a meaningless life. And that's the real tragedy of Osamu Dazai. He isn't suicidal because he's depressed, though he probably is. He isn't suicidal because he's weak. He's anything but. He's suicidal because he doesn't see the point of living. Unlike most characters who struggle against death, Dazai exists in a state of passive nihilism. Nothing excites him, nothing scares him, nothing feels real to him. So in the absence of meaning, he does what any logical person would do. He turns his own life into a joke. Because if nothing matters, why not have a little fun on the way down? It's like he read The Myth of Sisyphus and went, oh, so life is absurd? Cool. Guess I'll just roll with it, literally. Despite his constant talk of dying, despite his lifelong obsession with suicide, despite all the ways he tries to exit the world, Dazai keeps surviving. Why? Because somewhere, deep down, in that tangled mess of contradictions, dark humor, and self-destructive tendencies, he wants to live. He may not admit it, he may not even fully realize it, but every time he steps in to save someone, every time he outsmarts an enemy, every time he chooses to keep going instead of giving in, he proves that some part of him still believes there's something worth living for. Maybe it's the armed detective agency, maybe it's the people he protects, maybe it's just habit at this point. But whatever the reason, Dazai continues to exist. And that's what makes him one of the most fascinating, complex, and paradoxical characters in anime. Because he is a man who wants to die, yet refuses to let himself. A man who laughs at death, but secretly keeps fighting against it. A man who pretends not to care, but somehow always ends up doing the right thing. And that contradiction, that's what makes him Osamu Dazai. It's hard to imagine Osamu Dazai being one of the most feared figures in the criminal underworld. But long before he was flirting with waitresses and annoying kunikita, he was something else entirely. A cold, ruthless tactician. A man whose mere presence could send shivers down the spine of even the most hardened criminals. A port mafia executive. The same man who now spends his time reading suicide manuals for fun was once the right hand of Mori Ogai, the boss of the most dangerous crime syndicate in Yokohama. And let me tell you, he was terrifying. Dazai wasn't just good at being a mafia executive. He was unnaturally, almost effortlessly good. The man didn't need to raise his voice, use brute force, or even break a sweat to get things done. He could outmaneuver entire organizations while sipping a cup of tea. And the scariest part? He didn't do it out of ambition. He didn't want money, power, or control. He did it because he had nothing better to do. For Dazai, working for the mafia wasn't about loyalty or a sense of purpose. It was boredom management. While other criminals killed for revenge, money, or status, Dazai treated murder like a mildly interesting science experiment. No emotion, no hesitation, just results. And that's what made him far more terrifying than any bloodthirsty killer. Imagine playing chess against someone who doesn't even care if they win, but somehow they keep checkmating you just because they're bored. That was Dazai in the Port Mafia. Dazai's relationship with Mori Ogai, the boss of the Port Mafia, is one of the most unsettling mentor-student dynamics in anime. Mori didn't choose Dazai because he was loyal. He didn't choose him because he was strong. He chose Dazai because he was dangerous. Dazai had the kind of mind that could tear apart entire organizations without ever lifting a gun. And Mori, he saw that potential and shaped Dazai into his ultimate weapon. But here's the thing, Dazai wasn't manipulated into this role. He knew exactly what Mori was doing. He just didn't care, because to him, life was pointless anyway. If he was going to exist, he might as well see how far he could push the limits of his own intelligence. And push them he did. Under Mori, Dazai became the mafia's ultimate strategist, the man who could make or break entire criminal empires with nothing but words. And he did it all with that same emotionless smile. At this point, I'm convinced that if Dazai ever played poker, he'd bankrupt every casino in Japan just for the fun of it. For years, Dazai played his role perfectly. He was the mafia's ace, the genius tactician with no fear, no hesitation, and no real moral compass. And then, one day, he walked away. No dramatic betrayal. No blood-soaked rebellion. He just left. So, what happened? Why did a man who spent years outplaying, outthinking, and outmaneuvering every enemy suddenly decide that the Port Mafia wasn't for him? The answer? Oda Sakunosuke. If Mori was the one who shaped Dazai into a monster, then Oda Sakunosuke, Odasaku, was the one who made him question whether he wanted to stay one. Odasaku was a different kind of mafia member. He refused to kill. He protected orphans. He believed that even in a world of crime, there was still a way to live with dignity. And for some reason, Dazai respected him. More than that, he envied him. Odasaku had something Dazai had never had, a reason to live. And for the first time, Dazai started to wonder, what if life didn't have to be meaningless? What if there was something worth living for? At this point, Dazai's character development is basically just a mafia version of that one friend who actually cares about you and makes you rethink all your life choices. But life, as we all know, loves irony. Just when Dazai found a glimpse of something real, just when he thought maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of his nihilistic existence, Odasaku was killed. And in his final moments, he didn't tell Dazai to take revenge. He didn't tell him to burn the mafia to the ground. He simply said, you should at least become a man who saves others. And that was the moment Dazai changed. For the first time in his life, someone gave him a direction. And so he walked away from the Port Mafia. Not because he wanted to be a hero. Not because he suddenly had a grand moral awakening. But because for the first time, someone gave him a reason to try. Dazai may have left the Mafia, but the Mafia never left him. No matter how much he jokes, no matter how many times he plays the fool, he will always carry the ghosts of the past on his shoulders. He was shaped by monsters. He was trained to be one. And yet somehow, against all odds, he chose to be something else. But the question remains, is he truly free from that past? Or is he still just a ghost, drifting between two worlds, never fully belonging to either? Because in the end, Osamu Dazai is not just a former mafia executive. He is a contradiction, a mystery, and above all, an enigma that even he himself has yet to fully understand. For most of his life, Osamu Dazai drifted through the world like a man with no destination. He was untouchable in the Port Mafia, a prodigy of strategy, manipulation, and destruction. He could control the battlefield, outthink any opponent, and kill without hesitation. But for all his power, he felt nothing. No ambition, no satisfaction, no reason to exist beyond playing the game. Then one day, he met Oda Sakunosuke, and suddenly, for the first time in his life, Dazai wasn't the smartest person in the room. Not because Oda was more intelligent, not because he was stronger, but because Oda had something Dazai never did, a purpose. And that single difference would change the course of Dazai's life forever. In the Port Mafia, killing isn't just part of the job, it's expected. Mercy is a weakness. Hesitation is fatal. You either become a monster or you get eaten by one. But Oda refused to kill. Despite being a mafia member, despite being surrounded by death, he held on to one rule. If I kill someone, I can never go back to the life I want. While everyone else in the underworld saw murder as a necessity, Oda saw it as a point of no return. And the craziest part? Nobody could make him break that rule. Not even Dazai. Imagine being in the mafia, surrounded by literal murderers, and saying, yeah, I'm just gonna not kill anyone. That takes an insane level of self-control, or a complete disregard for self-preservation. On paper, Dazai and Oda should never have been friends. One was a ruthless strategist, the other was a low-ranking mafia grunt who refused to kill. One played the game like a chess master, the other didn't even want to be in the game. But somehow, despite their differences, Dazai was drawn to Oda. And here's why. Dazai wasn't interested in people who were just like him. He already knew how his own mind worked. What fascinated him, what terrified him, were people who thought in ways he couldn't understand. And Oda was a complete mystery. Why did he stay in the mafia if he refused to kill? Why did he care about people in a world where life was cheap? How could he live without ambition, without greed, without the need to prove himself? For Dazai, Oda wasn't just a friend, he was an anomaly. And that made him the only person Dazai truly respected. Dazai studies people like he's collecting data for a research paper. But when he met Oda, he was basically like, this guy doesn't fit the equation. I must investigate further. For the first time in his life, Dazai started to believe in something. It wasn't a grand ideology. It wasn't a noble cause. It was simple. Maybe life wasn't completely meaningless. Maybe, just maybe, there was another way to live. But the universe, as always, had other plans. Just when Dazai started to think he had found something real, just when he thought maybe he didn't have to be a monster forever, Oda was taken from him. Dazai's character arc is basically emotionally detached, mafia genius gets hit with one meaningful friendship and has an existential crisis. Dazai didn't leave the Port Mafia because he felt guilty. He didn't leave because he wanted redemption. He left because, for the first time, someone gave him a direction. Oda was gone, but his words remained. And if Dazai couldn't find a reason to live for himself, then maybe he could live for Oda's final wish. So he did the only thing that made sense. He walked away. He turned his back on the Port Mafia, on Mori, on everything he had ever known. Not to become a hero, not to erase his past, but to see if a man like him, a man who had spent years destroying lives, could learn how to save them instead. Dazai's redemption arc isn't about becoming a good person. It's about him waking up one day and going, okay, fine, I'll try not being the worst for a change. Dazai may have left the Port Mafia, but he never truly left Oda's shadow. Even now, years later, even as a member of the armed detective agency, his entire existence revolves around that one final conversation. Oda's death didn't magically fix him. Dazai is still broken, still haunted, still looking for a reason to exist. But for now, he has a purpose. And sometimes, that's enough. Because no matter how much he jokes, no matter how much he pretends to be above it all, at the end of the day, Dazai is still just a man keeping a promise. And that's what makes him one of the most compelling characters in anime. If you dropped Osamu Dazai into any other anime, he wouldn't just survive. He'd probably take over the entire plot before anyone realized what happened. Why? Because while most characters rely on strength, weapons, or supernatural powers, Dazai's most dangerous weapon is his mind. And trust me, that mind is scary. This is a man who outsmarts crime lords, manipulates government agencies, and controls the battlefield like a master chess player, all while making jokes about double suicide and annoying Kunikita just for fun. Let's start with his ability, No Longer Human. On paper, it's one of the most broken abilities in Bungou Stray Dogs. With just a touch, Dazai can nullify any other ability, completely erasing the powers of his enemies. Sounds ridiculously overpowered, right? Well, here's the thing. Compared to other flashy abilities, Akutagawa's Rashomon, Chuya's gravity manipulation, or Atsushi's Whir-Tiger form, Dazai's power is almost boring. He doesn't shoot lasers, he doesn't summon monsters, he doesn't punch holes through buildings. All he does is turn people back into regular humans. And yet, somehow, that makes him even more terrifying. Dazai really said, you guys can have your cool superpowers. I'll just make sure none of you get to use them. Because while everyone else is relying on their abilities, Dazai is relying on his brain. And that's the real reason he's so powerful. Here's the thing about Dazai. He doesn't just win fights. He makes sure they never even become fights in the first place. Every battle Dazai fights is over before it even begins, because by the time his enemies think they're making a move, they're already doing exactly what he wanted them to do. Let's break down how he destroys his opponents without even trying. Psychological warfare. Dazai gets inside people's heads faster than they can react. Before they attack, he's already analyzed their weaknesses. Before they open their mouths, he's already predicted what they're going to say. Manipulation. He lets his enemies think they're in control, right up until the moment they realize they've played right into his hands. Unpredictability. Dazai is impossible to read because he's always acting like an idiot. Dazai's battle strategy is basically look harmless until it's too late. And honestly, it works. Now, if Dazai is one of the smartest people in Bungou Stray Dogs, then Mori Ogai, the boss of the Port Mafia, is one of the only people who can match him in pure strategy. Mori and Dazai have a fascinating relationship. Mori was Dazai's mentor, the man who taught him how to survive in the underworld. But here's the scary part. Dazai didn't just learn from Mori, he surpassed him. Mori relies on strategy. Dazai relies on strategy, unpredictability, and psychological warfare. Mori is a master manipulator. Dazai is a master manipulator who plays the fool so nobody realizes it. So when Dazai left the Mafia, Mori didn't try to stop him, because he knew. He knew that if Dazai ever became his enemy, he'd lose. Mori saw Dazai grow into an unstoppable genius and went, yeah, I'm gonna just let him leave and hope he never comes back. But if there's one person who truly challenges Dazai, it's Fyodor Dostoevsky. Fyodor is a different kind of villain. He's just as intelligent as Dazai. He's just as manipulative as Dazai. He plays the long game, always moving his pieces before anyone realizes there's a game being played. So what happens when you put two unstoppable masterminds against each other? You get one of the most intense battles of intellect in anime. Dazai versus Fyodor isn't about who can hit harder. It's about who can outthink the other first. And let me tell you, it's a fight worth watching. This isn't just a chess match. This is 4D chess with psychological warfare, political manipulation, and at least one dramatic monologue every 5 minutes. Dazai doesn't need super strength, speed, or firepower, because he controls the battlefield before anyone even realizes there is one. He reads people like books. He sets traps before his enemies even know there's a fight. He turns every battle into a psychological game, and he always plays to win. But here's the most important thing. Dazai doesn't just fight for himself anymore. In the past, he used his intelligence to destroy. Now he uses it to protect. And that's what makes him truly terrifying. Because a Dazai who doesn't care about the world is already dangerous. But a Dazai who has something to fight for, that's unstoppable.